Well, I guess I should just start off with pastry of the day. Found a new place. I can't believe that there would be a new place. Like, how many pastry uh, shops am I going to find? Anyway, new place. Oh no. I guess I shook it up too much. But it's a lemon. Oh man, that sucks. It's a lemon. It's kind of a mushed lemon tart. I'll bet you it's still good though. Bonjour mes amis. Bienvenue à Avignon, en France. Welcome to Avignon in France. Today I'm going to do something a little differently. It's based on things that I've wondered and so had to figure out for myself. And so I'm going to share that with you. Namely, what is the difference between a cathedral, basilica, church, a chapel, and a temple? I've always wondered. I go into these churches. I've been visiting some Roman Catholic countries, and honestly, when I started, I had no idea what the difference was. So let me share that with you. Let's talk about it. So a couple of caveats before we begin. I'm not a religious person, so I'm just basically talking about like dictionary definitions and information. I don't mean to imply any judgment, and I certainly don't mean to imply any reverence or anything like that. I really enjoy admiring the architecture and the art, and that's basically what I'm hoping to do. Secondly, if I've got anything wrong, that's what the comment section's for. I appreciate it. So let's get started. So let's start off with the term church. Church is basically a place of worship. So it's all the buildings that you see. So cathedrals, basilicas, they're all churches, but not all churches are cathedrals or basilicas. That makes sense? They also, and this will become relevant in a bit, they also refer to the congregation itself as well. So not only is it a building, but it's the people who generally go to that building. So the church community. And of course, church is used as a generic term, which can often mean churches or places of worship for other religions, but specifically tend to be Christian places of worship. Otherwise, you'd call it a synagogue or a mosque. But some people use that. And again, if that's disrespectful, please let me know. I don't mean it to be. And of course, this is the Église Saint-Didier. I was here the other day. Very nice church, but it's not a cathedral. It's not a basilica. It's just a church. It's gorgeous, and it certainly doesn't mean it is any less of a architectural structure or a less meaningful place of worship at all. It's just a church, or in French we call it an église. So the second type is a cathedral, or the second type of church is a cathedral, and I'm standing behind or in front of the Cathedral Basilica of Our Lady of the Don. And it's both a basilica and a cathedral, but I'll get to that in a bit. But it is the Cathedral of Avignon. So the way it works is the Catholic Church has divided basically the entire planet into sections, right? Similar to like provinces, territories, states, that kind of thing. And they call them dioceses. And each diocese has a bishop, and each bishop has a cathedral, or basically a home base, a capital. And that's what a cathedral is. So every section, that's the main church. That would be the cathedral. So in this case, it's the one behind me that I have since had to move because there's like some kind of rock concert going on all of a sudden at 11:30 in the afternoon. Anyway, so technically, there is a throne, right? Like they call the seat of a diocese a throne. And most of churches, especially older ones, will actually have a throne in it. And that is the throne of the diocese. Some of them are, especially those from the medieval period, are pretty plain. but later on they got quite fancy. But more modern churches tend to just nominally have a throne. But as I said, not all cathedrals are basilicas at all. Most famously, St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican isn't the cathedral of that area or of Rome itself, for two reasons. Number one, it's a different country, the Vatican. It's a microstate. It's a tiny little country inside Rome. But secondly, there's already a cathedral of Rome. It's the Basilica of St. John Lateran. And that is where the throne of the Rome, of the Basilica, or that is where the throne of the Diocese of Rome sits. And so the bishop. Now, the bishop is technically the Pope, or the Bishop of Rome is technically the Pope. So it gets a little complicated, but technically he has to leave the Vatican and go down to St. John Lateran in order to fulfill his duties. But fun fact, when in the unification of Italy, starting in the 1860s, they were encroaching on Rome, wanted to include Rome as part of the new country, but the Vatican, or the Pope at the time, didn't want to. So for around 60 years, the Pope wouldn't leave the Vatican for fear of being captured or the Vatican being invaded. That was all changed in 1929 when they formalized the treaty that created the Vatican as its own microstate, run by the Pope, run by the Catholic Church. But the Cathedral of Rome is still St. John Lateran, and technically the Pope's got to head over there quite a few times. Now, the strange part is, I thought cathedral was just basically fancy church, and a basilica was a fancy church, right? And I really didn't think that we had them in North America, certainly not Canada, where I'm from, and definitely not in the city I come from, which is Hamilton, Ontario. But there is a cathedral. There's a cathedral for every geographic location, right? Every diocese, right? Mine, the Roman Catholic, would be the Cathedral Basilica of Christ the King. It's a cool looking church right on the edge of town, right where you get on and off the highway on a bit of a hill. I've taken tons of photos of it. Didn't know. Basilicas, on the other hand, are different from cathedrals because they've been appointed as some kind of special status. Basically, that's what that means. It means it's a special church. How they get that special status? Well, they have to get that given to them by the Pope. And usually the reason for that is either the structure itself is special, the history behind the church is special, or, and this seems to be the easiest way to become a basilica, is have like be the guardian of a particular artifact. And they don't have to be like, the Ark of the Covenant or anything like that. Sometimes they're just proof of miracles, or they're holding the remains of saints. Behind me is the Basilique Saint-Pierre, which I visited yesterday, and it's you could see that it's not the Cathedral of Avignon, but you could see that it's a very special church. It's a very big church, and it has some significance to this particular area. I do have a caveat though. In my research, I didn't find any proof that this is actually a basilica recognized by the Catholic Church, but they do call themselves a basilica. So just fair warning. But it's not the cathedral. We were just at the cathedral. Technically, there's actually only 4 basilicas, or to put it a little bit more clearly, is according to the Catholic Church, there are 4 major basilicas, and the rest are all minor basilicas, like possibly this one. There are 4 major basilicas. All 4 of them are in Rome, of course. So there's St. Peter's, obviously, the Cathedral, St. John Lateran. There's St. Paul outside the walls, and St. Mary Major. And all 4 of them, like I said, were in Rome and assigned as a major basilica. The rest of them were anointed as minor basilicas. But for the purposes of this video, and generally speaking, we all just call them basilicas. And as I said, the easiest way to get your basilica status seems to be by having the remains of someone of a saint and being associated with a saint. And most famously, the basilica in Venice, which is also the Venetian cathedral at this point. But they wanted to up the status of both Venice and the basilica that they had created. And so when Saint Mark or Saint Marco died in Alexandria, they went and stole his body. Like they went down there, put his body, his remains in a box, covered the top with pork, as legend has it, so that the Islamic guards would not look at the contents and they could escape. And then they buried him in St. Marco. And so they call the Basilica St. Marco's. It's saint, it's a basilica. Why he's associated with Venice, no one really knows. He visited there like once. But, you know, there's a case study on on making your church a basilica. Also understand that there's only one cathedral in each area, but there can be many basilicas, right? Lyon, which I just visited, has two. The big one on the hill, the Lady of Fourvière, and the Basilica of Saint Martin of Anet. Anet, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Both of which I was able to visit. And again, too, I didn't think we had basilicas in North America, certainly not where I live, but we've got a ton. We've got like 24. I had absolutely no idea. Toronto, which is the capital of Ontario, there, has both St. Peter's and St. Michael's. St. Michael's being the cathedral of the Toronto area, right? In fact, that church I mentioned, the Cathedral of Hamilton, where I live, is also a basilica, the Basilica of Christ the King. I didn't know, like an official Pope anointed basilica. Who knew? I don't think there are any dead saints in there, though. A chapel is just simply a place for prayer. Oftentimes, it's just a little section inside a church, a side room, or it could be a big fancy building outside the cathedral, which is the Cathedral of Avignon is up the road here on the other side of the walls. Basically, they're just spots for prayer, and they're designed to be usually associated with a particular saint or icon, which of course they encourage in the Catholic Church to pray to um, a saint as like kind of a middleman to God. There's jokes about that, but I mean it's one of the reasons why a lot of the Protestant religions broke off, right? Often what will happen is rich families, but not so rich that they could build their own church, would build chapels within the community churches. And it was a sign of prestige and luxury. But again, it's a small place. Now, of course, in North America, because of the association with small church, we often call the church a chapel. Although I don't know specifically which denominations do that. But growing up, I remember most of the churches being called chapels. Of course, I'm standing in front of a very fancy chapel down the street from the cathedral called the Chapelle des Pénitents Noirs. I got to get better at that. My apologies for brutalizing that. But it is a small praying space, cordoned off from the rest so that you'd be at peace. Or you could show off how rich you were by building it. So the last type I'll talk about is a temple. I'm standing outside the Saint Martial temple, or Temple Saint Martial. Basically, the only difference between a temple and a church, it seems to be that, as I mentioned, that the church is also regarded as, or defined as the congregation, or the people that go to that church. Whereas a temple is also a church. So, or it's another word for a church, the building itself, right? So church, building and congregation, temple, just the building. So in this case, the reason why this place is called a temple as opposed to specifically a church is because it is so old, it has no congregation anymore. This is right downtown Avignon. The gates are the gates to the city walls are just over there. You'd walk through here. In the 1200s, this would be your church, but over the years, the congregations moved to other spots, including the basilicas and the cathedral at the top of the hill. And this lost its congregation um, as the building became a little bit more decrepit and required that maintenance. Now it's a tourist spot. The tourist office is right over there. And unfortunately, I can't seem to figure out how to go in and visit. I don't think it's open at the moment. So otherwise I'd show you pictures. Or maybe it is open and I'll show you some pictures in a few seconds. So I hope this was helpful, hope it was informative. I've found the process of researching this really interesting myself, which is why I decided to throw together this video. And of course I wanted to get my facts straight, so I did a little bit more research, and of course having the visual aids certainly helps. So thanks for coming on this journey. Tomorrow there'll be another video, maybe about something else. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe so that you hear about it. But a like, a comment, please. If I got anything wrong, that's what the comment section's for. So please let me know. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're looking to plan your own adventures at some point. And now, when you come to Europe and you go into your chapels and your churches and your basilicas and your temples, you'll know a little bit more about what all that means. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Either way, au revoir. Good night, everyone.